Early morning light slipped through the tall windows of the old concert hall, touching every seat and every corner with a soft golden glow. The place was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt almost sacred. Most people only saw this hall when it was filled with noise, audience chatter, applause, music, but at this hour, it was still waking up. The famous pianist walked inside with slow steps, taking in the silence he had always loved before his performances. For him, these empty hours were the calm before the storm. No fans, no interviews, no noise. Just him and the piano. He set his bag down and stretched his arms a little, feeling the stiffness from a long night. Today's concert was important. Critics, sponsors, students, and newcomers were all expected. The pressure was familiar, and he carried it the same way he carried his breath. When he walked closer to the stage, he noticed someone he hadn't seen before. A cleaning lady stood near the piano, wiping dust from the side of the instrument with gentle, careful movements. She was older than him, shorter in height, dressed in a plain uniform that had seen many long days. Her hair was tied back neatly. She didn't look up at first, completely focused on her work. He wasn't annoyed to see her there. In fact, he found it comforting. People like her kept this place alive, even when the spotlight wasn't shining. He stepped onto the stage with a casual smile. "Good morning." His voice echoed through the hall. She looked up quickly, almost startled, as if she wasn't used to anyone greeting her. "Good morning," she replied softly. He sat down on the piano bench, lifted the cover of the keys, and let his fingers rest lightly on them. Before he started playing, he glanced at her again. She was still working quietly, trying to finish her task without disturbing him. Maybe it was the calm mood, or maybe he just felt playful, but he suddenly said, "Want to try playing something?" His tone was light, almost joking. Her hands froze. She looked at him like she wasn't sure she heard him correctly. He laughed a little. "Just joking," he added. "Unless you want to." She smiled politely, not offended, but her eyes carried a hint of confusion. He didn't mean any harm. He was simply being friendly, the way performers sometimes get when they're relaxed. Still, something in her expression made him pause. It wasn't annoyance, nor fear, nor disbelief. It was something deeper, something like remembering. She looked down at the keys for a moment too long, as if the sight of them stirred an old part of her mind. He noticed. "Have you played before?" he asked gently. She quickly shook her head, a little embarrassed. "Long time ago," she said, almost in a whisper. "Very long." The pianist leaned slightly closer, curious now, not because he expected anything amazing, but because her voice held the story. "You can touch it if you want," he said. "Just a few notes. I won't tell anyone." He grinned, trying to make her comfortable. She looked around the empty hall. No audience, no cameras, no pressure. Only the hum of quiet lights and the faint echo of her breath. "I should finish my work," she replied, but her eyes did not move away from the piano. He nodded. "Of course, but the piano won't mind." She gave a small laugh at that. Something about the way he said it calm, honest made the moment feel safe. She slowly stepped closer, her cleaning cloth still in her hand. I haven't played in years," she said again, more to herself than to him. "Then one more time won't hurt," he said lightly. She hesitated. Her fingers brushed the edge of the piano, gentle and unsure. The pianist didn't move or rush her. He simply waited to him. It was just a harmless moment. But to her, it felt like standing at the edge of something she had once dreamed of. A door she had locked long ago. She finally placed the cleaning cloth aside and sat down on the piano bench, leaving a small space between them. She sat stiffly, like she was afraid of breaking something. "Only a few seconds," she said quietly. "Take your time," he replied. Her hands hovered above the keys. For a moment, she did nothing except breathe. Her fingers trembled, not from fear of him, but from fear of remembering herself. She pressed a single note. It rang through the hall, soft but clear. She pressed another. The pianist didn't speak. He didn't even blink. Then she played 3. Notes in a small pattern, hesitant, uneven, but familiar. It was the beginning of a children's melody, the kind beginners often learn. She played it slowly, almost unsure if the piano would respond the way it should. Her hands felt old memories waking up. One note at a time, the pianist tilted his head, surprised by the way her fingers moved. They were slow, yes, but controlled. Not random, not clumsy. They belonged to someone who once knew what she was doing. She stopped suddenly and pulled her hands away. "I told you," she said with a shy smile. "It's been too long." "That was good," he said honestly. "You haven't forgotten." She shook her head. "Oh, I forgot long ago. Life got busy." He understood. He had met many people who loved music once, but had to give it up because life demanded more practical things. Work, family, responsibilities. Not everyone could chase dreams. "Do you want to try something a bit longer?" he asked Dot. She hesitated again. "I don't want to disturb your practice. Today must be important for you." "It is," he said, "but this is important too." Her eyes softened. She looked at him as if she was trying to understand why someone like him, famous, respected, admired, would care whether she played or not. "Just a little more," she whispered. She placed her fingers on the keys again. This time, she closed her eyes for a moment, letting silence settle inside her. When she began playing, her hands were still slow, but there was new confidence in them. The melody grew more fluid. The notes connected. Her touch became lighter. It was like watching an old engine start up again, rough at first, then smoother. With every moment, the pianist's eyebrows lifted. He wasn't expecting this. The cleaning lady's face softened as she played. Memories that she thought were buried began returning, years of practicing after school. The joy she felt when she learned her first full song. The way her mother clapped for her after every new piece. But then came the memories she did not like. To think about the day she had to quit lessons, the job she had to take to support her siblings, the years she watched other people's dreams go forward while hers stayed behind. She didn't play anything complicated, but she played with heart, with feeling, with honesty. The pianist listened carefully. Her fingers had a natural rhythm, a natural understanding, something that couldn't be faked. After a short minute, she stopped again, almost embarrassed by how much she allowed herself to remember. She pulled her hands away and folded them in her lap. "Enough," she said quietly. "That is all." The pianist looked at her with a gentle smile. He wasn't laughing anymore. He wasn't joking. His eyes were full of a quiet surprise, the kind that deepens when someone sees something unexpected. "You have a gift," he said simply. She shook her head, but she couldn't hide the emotion in her eyes. That was from another life. He didn't argue. He just watched her stand up slowly, pick up her cleaning cloth, and return to her work. But the way she moved now was different, lighter, as if a weight she carried for years shifted just a little. She wiped the piano gently again, almost with affection. The pianist leaned back, thinking about what just happened. He came for practice, but instead he found a story hidden in plain sight, and something inside him whispered that this was only the beginning. She returned to sweeping the stage floor. He watched her for another moment, still curious, still surprised. Then he placed his hands on the keys and began to play softly, letting the room fill with sound once more. But this time, his music carried a new feeling, something he couldn't explain, something born from a joke that wasn't a joke anymore. The hall was still quiet, but something felt different, after the small moment they shared. The cleaning lady had gone back to her work, sweeping the corners of the stage with slow, thoughtful motions. The pianist watched her for a moment longer, still surprised by how naturally she had touched the keys. He hadn't expected anything like that when he had made that small joke. He wasn't even sure why he had made it, maybe to lighten the mood, maybe to break the silence. But now, it felt like the silence had opened into something else. He leaned forward and placed his fingers on the piano again, but he didn't start playing right away. His mind wandered back to the way she had played, hesitant at first, then slowly gaining confidence, like someone trying to remember the words to an old song. There was something emotional in the way she touched the keys. Not skilled in a polished, trained way, but skilled in the way of someone who once loved music deeply. He pressed a few soft notes, trying to warm up, but his attention kept drifting back to her. She swept the stage floor with the same patience she had shown in her playing, steady, quiet, and thoughtful. She didn't look at him, but he could tell she was still thinking too. Moments like that didn't leave a person easily. When he finally started practicing, his music filled the hall with a warm, rich sound. The cleaning lady continued working, but he noticed her slowing down whenever he played something emotional. She wasn't watching him directly, but her steps softened as if she was listening without meaning to. After a while, she moved toward the seats, brushing dust from each row one by one. He watched her for a moment, wondering what her life must have been like. People rarely ended up working in places like this unless they had lived through years of difficult choices. Her clothes, though clean, showed signs of long days. Her hands looked strong but worn, like she worked more than she rested. As he played, a question kept rising in his mind. How could someone with such emotion in her fingers just walk away from music? He didn't ask, of course. It wasn't his place. But curiosity sat quietly beside him. She finished the aisle she was working on and stepped back onto the stage to gather a few tools. When she passed by the piano again, he stopped playing and looked up. She paused, half unsure if she should keep walking. He gave her a gentle smile. "You know," he said, "not many people can bring emotion into simple notes. It's not easy." She let out a shy laugh, trying to wave away his compliment. "Oh, please. That was nothing. My hands were shaking. I'm sure I sounded wrong." He shook his head lightly. "No, you sounded like someone who understands music here." He touched his chest with a soft tap. Her eyes softened with something fragile, an emotion she wasn't ready to show. She looked away and started adjusting the cloth in her hands. "Maybe once," she said quietly, "a long time ago." He waited for her to say more, but she didn't. Instead, she stepped back from the piano, almost like she didn't want to get pulled into another memory. She picked up her broom and moved toward the backstage area. The pianist watched her disappear behind the curtains, then returned to his practice. But no matter what piece he played, the memory of her timid melody kept slipping back into his fingertips. He tried to shake it off, focusing on the difficult runs and complex chords he needed to rehearse. The concert tonight was important. People expected perfection from him. And yet, that simple melody she played felt more natural and honest than many polished performances he had heard. About half an hour passed before she returned. This time, she carried a small bucket and cloth to clean the railing along the balcony. She worked slowly, taking her time with each section. He wondered if she was deep in thought or simply focused, but something in her expression felt different. A door in her mind had opened after years of being shut. When he took a short break to drink water, he walked toward the balcony where she was working. He didn't want to bother her, but he felt an odd responsibility, not to teach her, not to guide her, but to understand her. "You said you learned when you were young?" he asked gently. She paused, her cloth hovering over the railing. Her eyes looked far away for a moment, drifting into the past. Yes, she said softly. My father saved money to buy a small keyboard for me when I was a child. It wasn't fancy. Sometimes a few keys didn't work, but I used to play it every day. He listened quietly. I loved it, she added. But life changed. I had to leave home early. Work came first. She wiped another corner of the railing, her movements slower now. There was no time left for music after that. The pianist nodded gently. He had heard stories like this before, but hers felt heavier. Maybe because he saw the way the music had returned to her so easily, like an old friend she didn't know she missed. You didn't play at all after that? He asked. She smiled sadly. No, I used to think about it sometimes, but thinking is not the same as doing. And when you let something sit for too long, it becomes painful to touch it again. He understood. People often avoided the things they loved most when life made them feel unworthy of them. He leaned against the railing gently. But you still remember. That means something. She shook her head lightly. It doesn't change anything. My life is simple now. I work here in the high mornings, and then I go home. That's enough. He wanted to say something encouraging, something gentle, but he sensed that pushing too much would only hurt her. So he nodded instead. Thank you for playing earlier, he said sincerely. She looked surprised. For what? I barely played. Anything. For reminding me why music matters, he replied. Her eyes widened a little. I did that? He smiled softly. Yes, you did. She looked down at her hands, running her thumb over her knuckles. I didn't think someone like you would care. Someone like me? He asked. She hesitated. Someone important, successful, people who live in another world. He let out a soft breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. Success doesn't change how music feels. She nodded slowly, though she didn't fully believe him yet. The hall suddenly filled with distant footsteps as two stage workers entered the balcony area, carrying equipment for the evening rehearsal. The cleaning lady stepped aside to give them room. The pianist watched as she blended into the background, as if she were used to people looking past her. He didn't like how that felt. He returned to the stage, trying to shake off a strange heaviness in his chest. He played again, this time letting his emotions flow more freely. The hall absorbed each note, echoing with warmth. As he played, he noticed the cleaning lady slowing her work each time he reached a soft part of the melody. She didn't look directly at him, but her shoulders relaxed and her steps softened. She was listening even if she pretended not to. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. Then something unexpected happened. She came down the stairs slowly, carrying her cleaning tools, and stopped near the front row. Instead of walking past him, she sat for a moment, not fully sitting, but resting on the edge of a seat as if torn between leaving and staying. He didn't speak. He kept playing, letting the music create a quiet bridge between them. After a few minutes, she spoke softly, almost like she was talking to herself. I used to play a song, a simple one. It was my mother's favorite. He slowed his playing but didn't stop. Do you remember it? She looked unsure. Maybe. Pieces of it. He finally stopped playing and looked at her. If you want, you can try again. No pressure. She shook her head. No. I can't keep interrupting you. You're not interrupting, he said gently. I'm inviting you. The hall felt silent again. She hesitated for a long moment. Her hands tightened around the handle of her cleaning bucket. Her eyes flickered toward the piano, then away, then toward it again. She rose slowly and walked toward the stage. This time, her steps were not as uncertain as before. She placed the bucket down near the stairs and climbed onto the stage. The pianist moved aside again, giving her room. She sat down quietly, breathing deeply. "I can't promise it will sound right," she whispered. "Just play whatever feels." "Natural," he said. She closed her eyes, letting old memories come forward. Her fingers touched the keys gently, like she was greeting an old friend she hadn't seen in decades. She played a few soft notes. They were shaky at first, but then something shifted. Her shoulders relaxed, her breath steadied, and her hands began to move with more confidence. The melody she played was simple but emotional. It carried warmth, sadness, hope, and longing all at once. It was the kind of melody that didn't need words. The pianist listened without interrupting. The hall felt alive again, not with grand music, but with something real, something quietly powerful. When she finished, she didn't look at him right away. She stared at the keys, swallowing a small wave of emotion. That was beautiful. He said softly. She took a shaky breath. "I didn't think I could still remember. Some things stay," he replied, "even when we think they're gone." She let out a small, emotional laugh. "It feels strange, like I'm waking up a part of myself I left behind." He nodded slowly. "Maybe it's a part you weren't meant to leave." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up gently and stepped away from the piano, unsure of what to feel. The pianist watched her carefully. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. This was not just a moment. This was the beginning of something bigger, something she didn't even realize yet. And as she returned to her cleaning, the piano keys she had touched still seemed to carry the warmth of her hidden past, now awakened. The afternoon sun had climbed higher, filling the hall with a warm and gentle light. The pianist felt the hours slipping by, but time didn't feel heavy today. Something about the cleaning lady's unexpected music still lingered in the air, as if the walls of the hall had absorbed it and refused to let it fade. After she finished her shift, she quietly gathered her things. He watched from the piano bench as she wrapped her cleaning cloth, placed it neatly inside her small bag, and made sure everything was in order before leaving. She worked like someone who respected every job, no matter how simple. As she walked toward the exit, she paused for a moment and looked back at the piano. She didn't step closer, but she stared long enough for the pianist to sense the conflict inside her, wanting to stay, wanting to play again, wanting something she wasn't sure she had the right to want. Then she turned and walked out of the hall. The door closed softly behind her. He sat there for a few seconds, staring at the empty space she left behind. For some reason, it felt like a quiet page in a story had just turned. He tried to return to his practice, but his thoughts kept drifting toward her. Her simple melodies still echoed in the hall, mixing with his own music in a way he couldn't explain. He played the same notes she had played earlier, letting his fingers repeat the hesitant tune. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't supposed to be, but it held a truth he respected. As he practiced, people began to enter the hall. The sound team, lighting crew, and stage managers arrived, preparing for the night. The hall slowly shifted from calm to purposeful noise. One of the stage managers called out, "We'll start the rehearsal in a few minutes." "Need anything before that?" He shook his head. "Just a moment." He took a deep breath and closed the piano. For now, he had to focus. But his mind still held the picture of the cleaning lady playing with her eyes closed, remembering a part of her past she thought she had lost. Hours passed. The rehearsal went well, though he found himself distracted more than usual. The music was fine. The notes were right. But something about his performance felt slightly different, maybe a touch more emotional than he intended. After rehearsal, he greeted a few people backstage, answered simple questions, and signed some papers. Once things settled down, he headed out the back door of the hall into the quiet evening. The street was calm, glowing softly under streetlights. The cool air brushed his skin as he walked toward the parking area. He wasn't in a hurry to leave. The day had felt heavier, fuller than usual, and he needed a moment to let it settle. But as he passed by a small side gate next to the hall, he saw her again. The cleaning lady stood outside, waiting at the bus stop. Her posture was tired, but her eyes held a calm that came from years of carrying the weight of her life silently. She held her small bag close to her body, and her gaze drifted toward the concert hall every few seconds. He didn't want to disturb her, but he felt a pull to speak to her again. He walked closer, keeping his steps gentle. "Long day?" he asked softly. She turned, surprised to see him. "Oh, hello. Yes, it was." "You finished everything?" he asked Dot. She nodded. "Yes. I clean the hall every morning. Some days more than others." There was a small pause. She looked down at her hands. "I hope I didn't disturb your work earlier," she said. He shook his head immediately. "Not at all. You didn't disturb me. If anything, you gave me something good to think about." She smiled shyly. "I didn't do much." "That's not true," he said gently. A bus approached in the distance, its headlights glowing softly. She looked toward it, then back at him. "You have a big concert tonight," she said. "Good luck." He nodded. "Thank you." "Will you be here tomorrow?" "Yes," she replied quietly. "Every morning." He took a step back, giving her space as the bus stopped in front of her. Dot before stepping onto it, she gave him one last look. A small smile. A quiet uncertainty. And then she boarded the bus. Dot. The pianist watched until the bus disappeared down the road. He didn't understand the feeling stirring inside him, but it wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was something more subtle. A warm curiosity. A desire to see someone rediscover who they used to be. He walked to his car slowly, thinking about the quiet strength she carried. He drove home with the melody she played, repeating softly in his mind. The next morning came quickly. He woke earlier than usual, the memory of the previous day nudging him out of bed. After a quick breakfast, he headed back to the concert hall. It wasn't his usual time to arrive. He often came later, but today he felt an urge to be there sooner. When he stepped inside, the hall was quiet again, filled with the soft hum of morning lights. And there she was. The cleaning lady stood near the stage, wiping down the piano with the same gentle care she always used. She looked peaceful in the quiet morning. The hall felt like it belonged to her at this hour. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. "You're early today," she said. He smiled. "Couldn't stay away." She laughed softly, not sure if he was joking. He walked to the piano and placed his bag aside. "Did you sleep well?" he asked Dot. She nodded. "Yes. Did your concert go well?" "It did," he replied. "Better than I expected." "I'm glad," she said, wiping the side of the piano. He watched her hands for a moment. Her fingers were steady today, not trembling like yesterday. Maybe playing again had brought something back to her. Dot. After a moment, he said, "Would you like to play again today?" She paused. "Oh, I shouldn't. I have work to do." "You can work after," he said softly. "Only if you want to, of course." She hesitated, torn again between responsibility and desire. "You don't have to be perfect," he added. "Just play what you feel." Her shoulders lowered slowly, as if she were fighting an inner battle. Then she exhaled. "Maybe for a moment." She whispered Dot. She sat at the piano. This time, she didn't look as nervous. She placed her fingers on the keys as though they were familiar now. She played the same melody from the day before, but it sounded different, a little stronger, a little clearer, like a voice that had rested overnight. The pianist listened carefully. He could hear her emotions more clearly today. Her fingers weren't perfect, but they carried a kind of honesty he admired. When she finished, She looked embarrassed again. I make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, he said. But you have something special. She looked down. I don't think so. I do, he said gently. She wiped her hands on her apron, unsure of how to respond. You know, he continued, some people spend years trying to play with feeling. You already have that. She shook her head. But feelings don't pay. Bills. He paused. Her words landed with weight. She wasn't being dramatic. She was stating a truth she had lived for years. You're right, he said quietly. But that doesn't mean you should ignore something that brings you life. She didn't answer. She simply looked at the keys, tracing one of them with her finger. After a long moment, she whispered, I used to dream of becoming a pianist. I thought music was my future. The pianist felt something tighten in his chest. So what happened? He asked softly. She sighed. My father passed away. My family needed money. I took the first job I could find, and one job became another. Soon the dream felt silly. Silly? She nodded. Yes, people like me don't become pianists. Why not? He asked. Because life gets in the way, she said. He took a deep breath. Maybe life paused it. Maybe it didn't end. She looked at him, unsure of what to say. He continued softly. Dreams don't disappear just because time passes. Sometimes they wait. She looked away, her eyes glistening with something she didn't want to admit. Hope. I don't even know if I'm good enough anymore, she whispered. You don't have to know, he replied. You only have to try. She let out a long breath, almost trembling from the emotion rising inside her. I don't know why you care, she said. Quietly, he smiled gently. Because I heard something yesterday I don't hear often. Something real. She looked down again, her heart struggling between doubt and belief. And she stood slowly and stepped away from the piano. I should finish my work, she whispered. He didn't stop her. He simply watched quietly as she returned to cleaning. Her shoulders a mix of heaviness and something new, maybe fear, maybe hope, maybe both. The pianist sat back on the bench, deep in thought. He didn't know where this would lead. But he knew one thing clearly now. This woman didn't just clean the hall. She carried a story. A story that wasn't finished. And he felt strangely certain that he was meant to be a part of whatever came next. The hall was still settling from the last note she played the day before, yet the memory of it stayed fresh in everyone's mind. On the next morning, the pianist returned earlier than usual. He said it was for rehearsal, but deep down, he knew it was because of the cleaning lady. There was something about the way she played, something raw and honest, something that cut through the air like a quiet truth everyone had forgotten. It stayed with him all night, and even though he tried not to show it, he had been thinking about her talent more than he planned. But the cleaning lady did not come in the same way she usually did. She walked slowly, as if unsure whether she should even be there. She kept her head lowered, her steps small, and her hands squeezed together. She wasn't used to anyone noticing her, especially not someone like the pianist. Normally, she moved around the hall quietly, almost invisible, doing her work with care so she wouldn't disturb anyone. But now everything felt different. He looked up as soon as he heard the soft sound of her shoes against the floor. Good morning, he said. His voice was gentle, different from the joking tone he had when he first asked her to play. This time, he sounded sincere. She nodded back, shyly returning the greeting. She didn't know how to act around him now. It felt strange to be acknowledged by someone so well known, someone with posters across the city, someone whose music filled huge halls. She moved toward her cleaning cart, trying to focus on her tasks, but her mind kept drifting back to the piano. She remembered the way everyone had stopped yesterday, the way the pianist looked at her as she played. She replayed the moment 100 times in her head since then. Still, she told herself that it must have been a lucky moment, nothing more. The pianist watched her for a while, noticing how careful she looked, as though afraid to disturb the silence. He didn't want her to feel pressured or uncomfortable, but he couldn't ignore what he had heard from her fingers. The honesty, the emotion, the skill hidden behind years of silence. He took a slow breath and finally spoke. "I wanted to. Thank you for yesterday," he said. She paused, her back half turned toward him. She wasn't expecting that. "There is nothing to thank me for," she said softly. "There is," he replied. "What you played, it was special. It stayed with me all night." Her eyes lowered. Compliments were something she didn't know what to do with. Life had been more about survival than praise. "I haven't played in years," she whispered. "I don't even know how it sounded." "It sounded real," he said simply. "More real than anything I've heard in a long time." She didn't know how to respond. She kept wiping the floor, her movements slower now, her mind spinning, with thoughts she didn't want to face. She didn't want to believe him, because believing him would mean remembering all the dreams she had locked away long ago. A stage worker passed by and gave her a small smile. He had been there yesterday. A few others waved as well. She wasn't used to that either. Normally, people barely noticed her unless they needed the trash bins emptied. She took a long breath, trying to steady herself. After a moment, the pianist stepped away from the piano and walked a little closer. "Would you play again?" He asked quietly. Her heart skipped. She couldn't even look at him. "I don't think that would be a good idea," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why not?" he asked. She hesitated. She didn't want to tell him the truth, that she was scared of being seen, scared that yesterday had been a mistake, scared that she would disappoint him if she tried again. "You're busy," she said instead. "You have a concert coming. This is your place, not mine." He shook his head gently. "This hall can hold many stories. Yours deserves space too." She froze at those words. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Still, she didn't move toward the piano. She stayed by her cart, gripping the edge of it as if for support. The pianist didn't push her. He returned to the piano bench and began playing a soft melody, something calm and warm. The notes filled the hall like a slow sunrise, gentle and kind. He wasn't trying to show off. He wasn't performing. He was inviting her. She stood there listening, unsure what to do. Part of her wanted to run away from the moment before it grew too big. Another part of her wanted to step forward, sit at the piano, and let her hands speak again. He kept playing, glancing at her now and then, but not insisting on anything. Finally, after a long minute, she walked closer, only a few steps at first. She stood a few meters away, watching his fingers move. It felt safe watching from there. "You can join if you want," he said softly. She shook her head. "I don't know how to follow you." "You don't have to follow me," he said. "Just play what you feel." Those words made her chest tighten. She wasn't sure she was ready to feel anything. But she took another step, then another, until she was standing beside the piano. He moved his hands to a quieter part of the melody, giving her space. She stood silently, unsure whether she should sit. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Her breath felt uneven. She lowered herself slowly onto the bench. Her fingers hovered over the keys, cold and hesitant. "I'm not sure," she whispered. "You don't need to be sure," he said. "Just start." So she did. The first notes came out soft, uncertain. She played something simple, something from her childhood, something her teacher had once shown her long before life pushed music aside. The notes were small at first, like footsteps taken in the dark, but then something shifted. Her shoulders loosened, her fingers relaxed, and the music inside her began to wake. She played with the kind of feeling that doesn't come from training. Alone, but from life itself, loss, hope, loneliness, strength. The pianist listened quietly, stunned by how naturally she blended into the melody. He adjusted his playing, letting her lead, turning the moment into a gentle duet. A few stage crew members stopped to watch again, drawn in by the sound. The cleaning lady didn't notice the audience this time. She was somewhere else, lost in the memories that lived inside the music. When she finally finished, her hands fell still on the keys. The hall stayed quiet, as if the air itself wanted to hold on to the moment. The pianist exhaled softly. "You have something rare," he said. She shook her head. "I just remember old things." "No," he told her. "You feel every note. People spend years trying to learn that." She looked away, uncomfortable with praise, but secretly warmed by it. "You should come tomorrow," he said. "The orchestra will be here. I want them to hear you." She nearly stood up in shock. No, I can't. I'm just here to work." "You're here to exist," he replied. "And you exist as someone with talent." She didn't answer. She stood slowly, her legs shaky, and returned to her cleaning cart. She didn't know how to process any of this. He didn't push her further. He simply said, "Think about it. I'll be here." She nodded faintly before walking away. Her heart was heavy and loud at the same time. She couldn't believe what she had just done, or what she had just been asked to do. All day, as she cleaned, the hall, backstage rooms, and the long empty corridors, the sound of the duet played over and over in her head. She wasn't sure if she was afraid, excited, or both, but one thing was certain: the music she thought she had lost forever was waking up inside her again. The next morning felt heavier for her than any other day she had worked in the hall. She woke up before her alarm, unable to sleep properly. Too many thoughts had kept her awake. The music she played, the pianist's expression, the strange warmth in her chest when he told her she had something rare. She had tried to convince herself that none of it mattered, that it was only a moment, nothing more. But the truth was that the moment had shaken something inside her, something she thought had died long ago. She got dressed slowly, choosing the same simple clothes she always wore to work. Nothing about her morning routine changed, yet everything felt different. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied her shoes. She kept asking herself the same question. Should she go? Should she walk into that hall, knowing the orchestra would be there, knowing the pianist wanted her to play again? Who was she to step into their space? But she also felt something else, something like hope, something she hadn't felt in years. It scared her as much as it comforted her. She arrived at the concert hall earlier than usual, mostly because she wanted to avoid walking in while everyone was watching. The halls were quiet at that hour. The large stage lights were off, and seats sat in darkness like a silent crowd waiting to breathe again. When she entered the main hall, the pianist was already there. He wasn't practicing yet. Instead, he stood at the piano with the lid open, wiping dust from the surface with a soft cloth. He turned as soon as he heard her footsteps. "You came," he said, sounding almost relieved. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the floor. "I came to work. I'm not sure about anything else." He smiled gently. "Working is fine. You can do that. And if later you feel like sitting at the piano again, that's fine too." She appreciated that he didn't push her. Even though he wanted her to play, he never forced anything on her. She walked to her cart and began cleaning the aisles. Each sweep of her cloth was slower than usual. Her mind was too full. She kept hearing yesterday's duet, kept hearing the warmth in his playing, kept feeling the strange mix of fear and excitement. More people began to arrive: stagehands, technicians, 2 ushers, and eventually the orchestra members. One by one, they entered carrying their instruments, talking quietly among themselves. Some of them recognized her from the day before and gave small smiles. She felt shy under their gaze. She wasn't used to anyone noticing her presence. Pianist talked to the conductor in the corner. The conductor glanced her way once, then nodded thoughtfully. She didn't know what they were saying, but a part of her feared it was about her. Another part hoped it was Dot. As the orchestra warmed up, the hall filled with the scattered sounds of tuning strings humming, woodwinds testing breath, brass instruments echoing softly. It was a sound she loved, even when she wasn't playing. The sound of musicians preparing always stirred something inside her. Dot, the pianist, stepped onto the stage and signaled the orchestra. "Let's begin," he said. Dot. She continued cleaning, but she couldn't help pausing now and then to listen. They played through parts of the upcoming concert repertoire. The music rose and fell like waves. It filled her chest in a way that made her want to breathe deeply. After an hour, the pianist stood and looked around. "Let's take a short break." Some musicians set down their instruments, stretching their arms. Others walked off stage to get water or tea. The pianist walked directly toward her. Her heart sped up instantly. He stopped a few steps away, not wanting to invade her space. "Would you like to try playing something for them?" She panicked inside. "No, I can't. They're professionals. I'm not. I would just embarrass myself." "You didn't embarrass yourself yesterday," he said calmly. "That was different. It was just you. This is too many people. They would be lucky to hear you," he said. Dot. She shook her head, too overwhelmed to accept his words. "I don't belong on that stage." He looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe you don't see it yet," he said softly. "But you have a place here." Her breath trembled. She didn't know how to respond. "Just think about it," he added gently before walking back toward the piano. She watched him sit, watched him rest his hands on the keys. He began to play again, something slow and steady. The melody felt like a hand reaching out to her, steady and warm. She swallowed hard. She wasn't ready, but the music he played made it even harder to walk away. While she was still deciding what to do, she heard a voice behind her. "You're really talented," a violinist said softly. She turned, startled. The violinist smiled kindly. "I saw you yesterday. What you played, it was real. Not everyone has that." Another musician, a cellist, joined them. "We'd love to hear you again," he said. She felt her cheeks warm in embarrassment. "I'm just a worker here." "And we're just people with instruments," the violinist said with a light shrug. "Talent doesn't care about job titles." There, words settled into her heart, heavy and warm at the same time. Still, she walked away, needing space to think. She slipped into the back hallway, where old posters hung on the walls, photos of past concerts, old performers, moments she had always admired quietly. One poster showed a young pianist on stage many years ago. His face was glowing with confidence. She looked at the picture for a long time. She wondered what her life would have been like if she hadn't stopped playing. When she finally returned to the hall, the orchestra had resumed the practice. The music wrapped around her like a blanket. Her hands tingled again. The same feeling she had yesterday, the feeling of wanting to play, was rising inside her, impossible to ignore. She took a deep breath and slowly walked closer to the stage. The pianist saw her immediately. His expression softened. He didn't say anything. He simply shifted a little on the bench, making room. She felt her knees weaken. This was it. This was the moment she had been fighting all morning. A few musicians noticed her too. Their eyes brightened. Some sat up straighter. She walked up the stairs to the stage, her steps shaky but steady enough to carry her forward. She stood behind the pianist for a long second. "Are you sure?" She whispered. "No," he said gently. "But sometimes the best things start when we're not sure." Her heart trembled as she sat beside him. Her fingertips hovered over the keys. The orchestra waited quietly, some with small smiles. She let out a slow, trembling breath, and then she began to play. Her hands moved softly at first, as if afraid to disturb the air. But the melody grew with each passing second fuller, stronger, more alive. The hall seemed to change around her. The orchestra listened closely, their faces shifting from curiosity to admiration. The pianist joined her, matching her tempo, encouraging her through his playing. Before long, the conductor lifted his hands, signaling the orchestra to follow her lead. One instrument at a time joined in violins, cellos, flutes, the deep hum of the bass. She didn't expect it. She didn't even realize when they joined. She was lost inside the music, inside the part of herself that she thought she had buried. And yet here it was alive, bright, undeniable. When the piece finally came to an end, the hall stayed silent for a moment. Then applause rose, not loud or dramatic, but warm, genuine, and full of respect. Her hands trembled above the piano. She had never experienced anything like this. The pianist leaned closer and whispered, "Now, do you understand?" She swallowed, hard, still overwhelmed. "Understand what?" "That your talent deserves to live." She lowered her head, tears forming quietly at the corners of her eyes. She wiped them quickly, embarrassed, but no one judged her. The conductor spoke up from the podium. "If you ever want lessons, or if you ever want to join our rehearsals, the door is open." Truly, she couldn't believe it. She could barely breathe. For the first time in years, she felt something she had lost, something warm, bright, frightening, and beautiful. Hope. The hall felt different that morning, almost as if it could sense something important was about to happen. She walked inside slowly, unsure of how the new day would unfold. Her steps were quiet, but her heart wasn't. It beat fast, full of emotions she couldn't sort out yet. Everything that had happened in the last 2 days felt unreal. The pianist asking her to play, the orchestra joining in, the warm applause that had washed over her like sunlight. She kept wondering if she had imagined it, but the memory felt too clear to be a dream. She held her small bag tightly as she entered the main hall. The orchestra was already gathering, and the pianist stood near the piano, tuning a few keys out of habit. He looked up the moment she appeared. His face brightened in a soft, warm way that made her feel seen, not just noticed, but truly seen. "You're here," he said kindly. She nodded, unsure how to respond. She didn't want to seem too eager, but she also didn't want to pretend. She didn't feel something deep inside, something like hope, something that scared her because it felt too big. "You slept it all?" he asked with a gentle laugh. "Not much," she admitted. "Too many thoughts." "Same here," he said, surprising her. "Your playing kept replaying in my mind." She looked down immediately, shy and overwhelmed by his honesty. Some musicians waved at her as they settled into their seats. A few smiled in a way that showed they remembered how she played. She still wasn't used to attention like this. For years she had lived in the background, silent, unnoticed, blending in with the walls of the places she cleaned. But now people were looking at her with respect. It felt strange and warm and frightening, all at the same time. She went to her cleaning cart out of habit, as if holding on to her old routine would help calm her nerves. But her hands were trembling, and she knew it wasn't the cleaning she was nervous about. The conductor tapped his stand lightly. "Before we begin today, I want to say something," he announced. She froze. The orchestra quieted. The conductor looked at her directly, his eyes warm but serious. "You have a gift," he said plainly, "a natural sensitivity to music that cannot be taught. Yesterday, you moved this entire room with your playing. We would all be honored to have you continue joining our rehearsals whenever you wish." Her breath caught. She didn't know what to say. She had never thought she would hear words like that in her life. The pianist stepped forward. "And I want to offer something too," he said. "If you want to learn again, I can help you. Not as a famous pianist, not as someone on posters, just as another person who loves music. If you want lessons, guidance, or even someone to practice with, I'm here." She felt the warmth rise behind her eyes, the pressure of emotions too strong to hold. She looked down quickly, trying not to cry in front of everyone. "I'm not sure I deserve all of this," she whispered. The pianist shook his head. "Talent is not about deserving. It's about having something inside you that's meant to be shared." A soft silence settled around them. The orchestra watched her with gentle expressions, waiting for her to say something, but she couldn't find the words. She had spent so many years hiding her dreams that she no longer knew how to speak them. She wiped her eyes carefully and took a slow breath. "I don't know where I fit in," she finally said. "You fit here," the pianist replied. "More than you think." He motioned toward the piano. "Would you like to play today?" Her heart thudded. She looked at the instrument. The polished surface seemed to shine brighter than usual, as if calling her. She hesitated, then took a shaky step forward. "I can try," she said softly. The pianist stepped aside, giving her space. She lowered herself onto the bench, feeling the familiar shape beneath her. The hall grew quiet. Even the air felt still. Her fingertips touched the keys. A soft chill ran through her arms. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the feeling she had yesterday, the surprising freedom, the way the music had made her forget everything else. She began to play. The first notes were tender, almost shy. But as the melody grew, something inside her opened. It felt like she was speaking without words, like she was telling the story of her life, its quiet struggles, its lost dreams, its small joys. Her hands moved with a mix of caution and courage, as if rediscovering herself note by note. The orchestra watched in awe. Then the conductor raised his hands slowly, signaling them to join. The instruments entered one by one, soft at first, then fuller, supporting her melody like gentle wings. The music filled the hall, rising high into the air, swirling in warm waves. The sound felt like a conversation, a dialogue between her heart and the world she had been afraid to face. The pianist watched from the side, his eyes soft with admiration. He didn't need to join this time. This moment belonged to her. When the final note faded, the hall fell silent again. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the applause came, not loud or showy, but deep, sincere, and full of respect. She felt her chest tighten. Her hands shook on her lap. She didn't know how to carry the weight of so much appreciation. The conductor stepped forward. "You have a place with us," he said. "If you want it." She swallowed hard, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now," the pianist said gently. "Take your time. Just know the door is open." The rest of the day passed like a dream. She returned to her cleaning tasks, but she moved slowly, her mind far away, floating somewhere between fear and hope. Musicians passed her in the hall and gave warm smiles or small nods. A few whispered, "You were amazing," as they walked by. She didn't know how to accept praise. She didn't know how to handle being seen. But she felt something inside, her starting to shift. Something she had buried years ago was beginning to breathe again. As the rehearsal ended, the pianist waited for her near the side door. "May I walk you out?" he asked. She nodded, feeling shy but grateful. They walked through the quiet hallway together. Posters of past performers lined the walls. She glanced at them, then at him. "I'm not like them," she said softly. "No," he replied. "You're yourself, and that's enough." They walked outside, where the evening light was soft and gentle. "You know," he said, looking at her with a warm smile, "sometimes life hides our dreams so well that we forget they were ever ours. But when something wakes them, it's hard to ignore." She looked at her hands, the same hands that had cleaned floors for years, the same hands that had once played music in a small childhood room, the same hands that now trembled with new possibilities. "I'm scared," she admitted. He nodded. "Everyone is when they care about something." She breathed in the cool air. "What if I fail? What if you don't?" He replied. A quiet moment stretched Betwy.